Now we come to the topic of professional ethics and standards. Need I mention this particular topic, which is part of the course curriculum, is one of the most important topic. And why it is one of the most important topic, and that is because it is the expectation of the government of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs that the valuation of professionals who qualify the valuation exam and who start practicing as valuation professional, they set the highest of the standards of ethics and professionalism. That is the expectation that all the stakeholders have with the qualified valuation professionals. And for that purpose, the valuation rules constitute something which is known as Model Code of Conduct for registered valuers. Model Code of Conduct for registered valuers. Now, in this Model Code of Conduct for the registered valuers, what the authorities have brought out, they have listed out 29 different practices that they expect the valuation professionals to follow. 29 different practices, good practices, ethical practices that they expect the valuation professionals to follow, and they have grouped them in 8 different categories. We will discuss them. We will discuss all these 29 best practices, which are ethical practices, which are expected to be followed by each and every valuation professional under the 8 categories. Now, before we start discussing that, there is a very good definition which has been given by late Sri Nani Palkhiwala ji. And how does he define a true professional? A true professional. And I think we can take a leaf from what late Shri Nani Palkhiwala ji has given definition of a true professional. True professional कौन है? According to Nani Palkhiwala ji, number one, firstly, a man must have the courage of conviction. He must not be coward. He must not be coward. Number two, he must honestly believe certain things and he must say publicly what he believes privately. Secondly, Mr. Nani Palkiwala further says, secondly, he must have integrity, not only financial integrity, which is much more common than intellectual integrity. Number three, he says he must have intellectual honesty, which makes him say what he believes to be right. So, if a professional has intellectual integrity, he will never give an opinion merely to suit the client. Merely to suit the client. And he says further, I think every professional must have that ideal before him when advising clients. And finally, what he says, humility is just as important as courage and intellectual integrity. The higher a man goes in life, humbler he should be. Now, this is how late Sri Nani Palkhiwala ji defined as to who a true professional is. And need I mention, these valuation rules which have been brought out, they have been brought out with an expectation that everyone who practices as a valuation professional will prove himself to be a true professional by sticking with the ethical practices and highest order of the professional standards. So this model code has got 8 different chapter, and and let me tell you, there are 3-4 questions that you can expect from these model codes. And what kind of questions can you expect? You can expect question as to a particular practice that will be given to you in the examination, and they will ask you which of the 8 groups it belongs to. तो आपको क्या करना है? आपको पहले ये समझना है कि ग्रुप की हेडिंग क्या है और उस ग्रुप के हेडिंग के अंडर में कौन कौन सी प्रैक्टिसेस हैं, एंड देन यू विल बी एबल टू आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन क्वाइट इजीली. So the first group is integrity and fairness. integrity and fairness, and that is the valuation professionals are supposed to exhibit highest order of integrity and fairness. Number two, professional competence and due care. Number three, independence and disclosure of interest. That means what? That means the valuation professional got to be independent of the entity for which he is doing a valuation exercise. And not only he has to be independent, but he also has to make disclosure of any interest that may exist. Number four is confidentiality. Number five is information management. Number six is gifts and hospitality. So, as a valuation professional, neither you are supposed to give gifts to anyone, which might influence the client, nor you are expected to accept gift from anyone or hospitality from anyone, because if you give gifts or if you receive gifts, there is a full possibility that your exercise of valuation may be compromised. Number seven is remuneration and costs, and number eight is occupation, employability, and restrictions. So, friends, these are eight groups under which 29 best practices of ethics and professional standards have been incorporated in the Model Code of Conduct for Registered Valuers. Let us look at all these eight groups one by one and understand as to what are the best practices listed under each one of them. So, in case of integrity, and fairness, there are four best practices. And best practice number one, follow high standards of integrity and fairness. Number two, maintain integrity of being honest. Number three, provide true and adequate information. And number four, don't do anything that will bring disrepute to the profession. So these are the best practices which are incorporated under the first heading, and that is integrity and fairness. Under the second heading, which is on professional competence and due care, there are five best practices. And which are these five best practices under the group professional competence and due care? And remember, if you understand what is the group heading is professional competence and due care. So you will be very easily be able to make out कि कौन सी best practice will fall into this category. So the first best practice as part of the professional competence and due care is that the valuer should render at all times high standards of service, exercise due diligence, and ensure independent professional judgment. That is number one under professional competence and due care. That is the second group. Number two, a valuer should carry out professional services in accordance with relevant technical and professional standards. So that's number two. Number three, a valuer should continuously maintain professional knowledge and skill. तो क्या मतलब है इसका कि under the second group, which is on professional competence and due care, the third best practice requires the valuation professional कि उसने क्या करना है, he has to maintain professional knowledge and skill all the time. The fourth best practice as part of the professional competence and due care is he should not disclaim liability for his expertise. यानी कि as a valuation professional, you cannot write in the valuation report that I don't take responsibility for anything which is incorporated in my valuation report. No, you can't do that because you are a valuation professional. You have to take responsibility. You can give a disclaimer of responsibility in respect of an information which is given to you by the client. उसके बारे में आप डिस्क्लेमर दे सकते हो, लेकिन जो आपने वैल्यूएशन की एक्सरसाइज करी है, जो मेथड यूज़ किया है, जो अप्रोच यूज़ करी है, जो प्रमाइस यूज़ करी है, जो पर्पज़ ऑफ वैल्यूएशन यूज़ किया है, उसके बारे में आप डिस्क्लेमर नहीं दे सकते. उसके बारे में आप नहीं कह सकते दैट आई डोंट टेक एनी claim. I do not take any responsibility for any of those things, and that's your fourth best practice under the second group, and that is professional competence and due care. And the last best practice or ethical practice which is listed in the second group, and that is a valuer should have a duty to carry out with care and skill the instructions of the client. So ये ड्यूटी है एक वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल की, that he has to follow the instructions of the client, but so long as those instructions which are given by the client are compatible with requirement of integrity, objectivity and independence. So you have to follow the instructions of your client so long as they are compatible with requirement of integrity, objectivity and independence. And that's your second group on professional competence and due care. The third group, third heading or third group for the in the model code of conduct for the valuation professional is about independence and disclosure of interest. And there are 8 ethical practices which are mentioned in this third group on independence and disclosure of interest. 8 practices. What those 8 ethical practices are? Number 1, that is, valuer should act with objectivity in his professional dealings by ensuring that his decisions are made without the presence of any bias, conflict of interest, coercion or undue influence. That's number 1. Number 2, a valuer should not take up an assignment under the act or rules if he or any of his relatives are associate or his associate is not independent. So the second ethical practice listed under the group independence and disclosure of interest talks about or talks of what? It talks that in case if a relative or associate of a valuation professional is not having independence with the client, then that valuation professional should not accept that assignment. Number 3 under this group is maintain कंप्लीट इंडिपेंडेंस, यानी कि वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल का क्लाइंट के साथ में सिवाय वैल्यूएशन करने के और किसी भी तरह की रिलेशनशिप नहीं होनी चाहिए, एंड नंबर 4, द वैल्यूअर शुड व्हेन वेयर एवर नेसेसरी disclose to the client possible sources of conflict of duties and interest, and that is what a valuation professional is supposed to disclose to the client कि उनका कोई conflict of interest है तो पहले से बताना है. Number 5, a valuer should not deal in securities of any subject. तो अगर आप किसी कंपनी के रजिस्टर्ड वैल्यूअर करके अपॉइंट होते हो तो जैसे ही आपको मालूम पड़ता है कि आप किसी कंपनी के रजिस्टर्ड वैल्यूअर करके अपॉइंट हो सकते हो, तो फ्रॉम दैट मोमेंट ऑनवर्ड्स you or your associate or your relative or your acquaintances should remain away from dealing in the securities of that company. And that's your best practice or ethical practice number 5 under the group independence and disclosure of interest. Number 6 under the same group is a valuer should not indulge in mandate snatching. तो इस पर सवाल आ सकता है, व्हाट इज़ मैंडेट स्नैचिंग? मैंडेट स्नैचिंग का मतलब क्या है कि कोई क्लाइंट किसी दूसरे वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल को असाइनमेंट दे रहा है और आपको मालूम पड़ता है कि द असाइनमेंट इज़ बीइंग गिवन एट अ फीस ऑफ 5 लाख ऑफ रुपीज़. तो अगर मैं और आप वो क्लाइंट के पास में पहुंच जाते हैं और क्लाइंट को बोलते हैं कि आप वो 5 लाख ले रहा है, हम आपको ये काम 4 लाख में करके देंगे, और इस तरह से अगर आप ये मैंडेट उससे छीन के अपने पास में लेते हैं, दिस इज़ नोन एज मैंडेट स्नैचिंग, एंड मैंडेट स्नैचिंग इज़ completely prohibited under the model code of conduct under the group independence and disclosure of interest. Number 2, you cannot do convenience valuations. And what is the meaning of convenience valuations? That means कि जैसा क्लाइंट को वैल्यूएशन चाहिए उस तरह का वैल्यूएशन करने का आप क्लाइंट को कमिट नहीं कर सकते हैं. So you cannot do the convenience valuations. Your valuations has to be professionally done, and your valuation has to be done as you would deem it necessary. Then not charge सक्सेस फीस. सो इस पर क्वेश्चन हो सकता है, व्हाट इज सक्सेस फीस. सक्सेस फीस का मतलब ये है कि एज पर द इंडिपेंडेंस डिस्क्लोजर ऑफ इंटरेस्ट ग्रुप, अ वैल्यूअर प्रोफेशनल, अ वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल कैन नॉट टेल द क्लाइंट कि अगर वैल्यूएशन 50 करोड़ का होगा तो मेरी फीस, या मेरी फीस जितना भी वैल्यूएशन होगा उसके 2% होगी. So that means it means it is a success fees based on the success. So that is not permissible as per the code of conduct. And the next one is in case of any fairness opinion or independent expert opinion submitted by a valuer, if there has been a prior engagement in any unconnected transaction, the valuer should declare the past association with the company well in advance. So that's your independence and disclosure of interest. Then under the confidentiality, there is only one clause under the confidentiality, that is the group 4, number 4, confidentiality. और वो क्या प्रैक्टिस है, वो क्या क्लॉज है. क्लॉज ये है, एज अ वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल यू आर सपोज टू मेंटेन द कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी. यानी कि जो भी इंफॉर्मेशन आपको कंपनी की तरफ से मिलते हैं, आपको उनकी कॉन्फिडेंशियलिटी मेंटेन करनी है, यह आपका ऑब्लिगेशन है. ओनली राइडर इज कि अगर आपको ये इन्फॉर्मेशन किसी को अगर डिस्क्लोज करनी है किसी कारण से, so number 1 you will get the authority and approval from the client to do so. And the second rider is, in case if you have to disclose this information to any government authority as per any statute, in that case it is your obligation, and in that case you can of course disclose and break the confidentiality because that is your legal obligation. Under the group 5, which is on information management, there are 4 clauses, and the first one is under the information management group number 5, valuation professional has to maintain written contemporaneous records, and he has to maintain these records, that is under the group information management. And these records of the valuation should be maintained so as to sufficiently enable a reasonable person to take a view on the appropriateness of his decisions and actions. That's your number 1 under information management. Under information management, point number 2, a valuer should appear, cooperate and be available for inspection and investigation in front of any authority, registration authority or valuation professional organization or any statutory body, and that is as part of your information management. Under the information management, the third best practice or the ethical practice that a valuation professional is expected to follow, and that is a valuer should provide all information and records as may be required by the registration authority, the tribunal, the appellate tribunal, the valuation professional organization with which he is registered, or any other statutory regulatory body. तो अगर इनमें से कोई भी आपसे वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल से कुछ इन्फॉर्मेशन या रिकॉर्ड मांगता है, तो वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल इज अंडर ऑब्लिगेशन to furnish all those informations and details to any of these authorities under the information management. And the last one under the information management is valuation professionals should maintain proper working papers for a period of 3 years. So आपके एग्जाम में एक क्वेश्चन आ सकता है कि as per the model code of conduct, a valuation professional is required to maintain the records of the valuation for how many years, and your answer is going to be 3 years. लेकिन याद रखिए, अगर वो जो मैटर है if it is pending with any of the authorities, in that case this period of 3 years will automatically get extended until the time the legal matter or the issue which is lying with the government authority is settled. And that's your group number 5, which is on information management. Then your group number 6, which is on gifts and hospitality, and there are two clauses, and the clause number 1 is, as a valuation professional you should not accept gifts or hospitality from anyone. And number 2, as a valuation professional you should not offer gifts or hospitality or a financial or any other advantage to a public servant or to any other person, so as to make that person work in your favor. Group number 7, remuneration and cost. There are two ethical practices that you have to follow. Number 1, a valuer should provide service for remuneration which is charged in a transparent manner, is a reasonable reflection of the work necessary done. यानी कि आपको क्लाइंट से कितनी फीस चार्ज करनी है, आपको क्लाइंट से उतनी फीस चार्ज करनी है जितना कि आप काम करने वाले हैं. सो दैट मीन्स अंडर द रेम्यूनरेशन एंड कॉस्ट, a valuation professional has to follow the practice that don't overcharge your client unnecessarily. So don't charge your client for a service that you are not rendering to him. And number 2, under the remuneration and costs group, and that is group number 7, a valuer should not accept any fees or charges other than those which are disclosed to and approved by the person who is fixing his remuneration. तो जो आप फीस ले रहे हैं वो ऑफिशियल रिकॉर्ड पे जो फीस है वही लेंगे, उसके अलावा आप कोई दूसरी फीस नहीं लेंगे. एंड द लास्ट ग्रुप इज अबाउट ऑक्यूपेशन, employability and restrictions, and there are 3 practices which are to be followed by a valuation professional. The first practice is, a valuation professional should refrain from accepting too many assignments. So under the group 8, which is on occupation, employability and restrictions, पहला पॉइंट, पहली प्रैक्टिस क्या है? पहली प्रैक्टिस ये है कि डू नॉट टेक टू मेनी असाइनमेंट्स दैट यू आर नॉट एबल टू एग्जीक्यूट, thereby make your client suffer. That is number 1. Number 2 is, should not engage in employment. So as a valuation professional, if you are practicing as a valuation professional, as a registered valuation professional, then you are not supposed to engage in एम्प्लॉयमेंट, यानी कि आप कहीं किसी की नौकरी नहीं कर सकते हैं अगर आप वैल्यूएशन प्रोफेशनल की तरह प्रैक्टिस कर रहे हैं. और अगर आपको नौकरी करनी है तो आपको आपका जो रजिस्ट्रेशन है, मेंबरशिप, वो आपको सरेंडर करनी होगी. और अगर आप उसको टेम्परेरीली सरेंडर कर सकते हैं और आपको परमानेंटली आप उसको सरेंडर कर सकते हैं. And finally, the last point under the group occupation, employability and restriction, a valuer should not conduct business which in the opinion of the registration authority is inconsistent with the reputation of the profession. So as a valuation professional you should not do any job or any activity or anything which is not in line with the reputation of the profession. As a valuation professional we have to do everything that will bring more reputation, more goodwill to the valuation as a profession and not otherwise. So friends, these are 29 best practices, ethical practices grouped under 8 headings which all of us as valuation professional are expected to follow. So understanding of all these 29 practices and the 8 groups, remember, is not only necessary from the point of view of passing the exam, but it is also necessary to put in practice when you start practicing as a valuation professional.